Welcome back to the channel, ladies and gentlemen. This is a beautiful Thursday, and I hope you have had a wonderful day. Today, I have for you my Game Week 7 team selection. We'll be looking at my transfer plans all the way up to Game Week 10, and I will be sharing some strategic outlooks that are imperative, in my opinion. And not only that, you will be finding out whether or not I have chosen to go for another hot, spicy differential, just like I did last week. Now, there are so many of you who watch regularly, up to 70%, who are not subscribed. And if you could subscribe, I would greatly appreciate it. I assure you, you will be better off for it. We have had a wonderful start to the season, and maybe you can cash in on that luck as well. I also should have a pleasant surprise for most of you come Game Week 8. So, with nothing else needing to be said, let's hop into the video. Now, if you cast your minds back to Game Week 4, you will know that I started this video saying that the most exciting part of my team was the goalkeeper. Now, I'm not going to say the same thing here because it's not quite as exciting. However, I really am looking forward to it. I haven't so much been looking forward to Sels' fixture in the last 2 weeks. I expected at least one clean sheet, didn't get any, but nonetheless, they were just a bit right? On Sunday, however, we've got an interesting one. Chelsea away after just putting 4 past Brighton and Cole Palmer on top of the world. This is the type of fixture where Sels can haul. Forest's shot volume that they conceded in what we'll call the lesser games, for example, like Fulham and Brighton, isn't actually that high, especially shots on target. And I noticed that they don't really concede too many shots, which is good for clean sheets, but not so much ceilings and save potential. However, that won't really be a thing against Chelsea. I imagine Chelsea will have enough to have a decent amount of shots on target, at least 3, right? So I can get 1 save point and try and creep into the upper echelons of the bonus point structure. Forest are going to go there and set up in a similar way to Anfield, I imagine. I wouldn't be surprised, though, if they carry a little bit more transitional threat in their starting 11. I wouldn't be surprised if one of Orlanga or Hudson-Odoi starts, but I still expect a minimum of 3 natural central midfield profiles within that 4-4-2 midline. I expect them to go 4-4-2. I expect them to go deep. I wouldn't be surprised if it's the same fullback combination. That was brilliant. Ola Aina, who I imagine will be playing down the right flank for this game. If Alex Moreno is to play on the left, will do a very good job, I think, against Jadon Sancho. He's someone who likes to operate in those pockets, right? He likes to be associative with other players, and I think having someone really aggressive is the last thing you want when you're that type of player. And Ola Aina is that. I think Murillo's anticipation is something I noticed in the Liverpool game particularly, and he's really, really good at reading the game. I think with Chelsea's structure and Palmer dominating so much space, I can imagine him getting doubled up on a little bit and crowded out. So for all of those reasons and quite a few more, which we don't really need to go into in this, but just for those who own him, just a bit of hope. I'm actually fairly bullish in terms of what I can get. Obviously, I'm well aware that it's a very difficult fixture, but in terms of getting a haul, it's on the cards. It's on the cards. I don't think Chelsea are going to blow Forest away. It's one reason I'm not transferring in Cole Palmer for some of the reasons I just mentioned. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it, and it should be good. Now, following that cut, you probably expected to see the defense, and you probably expected to see me still stationed on the right side of the screen. However, given the transfer plans that I've created, we unfortunately cannot do that. Although I think this looks okay, even though I'm smaller. I'd be interested to see what you think. Going on to the transfer plans, right? I have 2 sides, similar to how I had a couple of weeks ago. The left and the right. The left is one route, and the right is the other route. So this is for 7, 8, 9, and 10. So let's just discuss by starting with the right. On the right side, we've got Lewis Hall to Pedro Porro this week, which leaves 0.1 million in the bank. If I am to do that in Game Week 7, I will roll in Game Week 8, which means that I will play Semenyo against Gabriel. Now, I spoke in depth in the preview as to what I think about Semenyo and why I'm actually relatively comfortable holding him. Sure, I don't really want Semenyo playing against my prime defensive asset, but you know what? It's 1 week. It's okay. Arsenal defense will be around 100% EO in that game week anyway, so am I really losing that much? Probably not, right? People have Saliba, and a lot of people have Riot, especially those who wildcarded. A lot of people have both, right? It's fine in that sense. I think from an EO standpoint, I also think Bournemouth can certainly get something or get a goal at least at home. So I'm not too opposed to that. The reason I'll be transferring Pedro Porro in this week is something I noticed with Spurs. So against United, they start to build with a 2-1 with Bentancur and a single pivot. But because both their rates, Maddison and Kulusevski, they almost form a box where one of them rotates in terms of dropping in. And they now have more quality in the second phase. They now have more quality should one be able to earn on the half turning and forward into the opposition's block. And I think it's a really smart build-up structure from Ange. But the reason that's important is because you notice that the fullbacks, they stay wide, but they don't go as advanced, especially Porro, because Kulusevski has somewhat of a dominion in that right half space, right? You'll see him loiter a little bit more defensively. I think that stops the transitional defensive threat that Spurs have really been conceding, right? And therefore their clean sheets will just go up a little bit. I think his attacking threat will go down as a result. But to be honest, I wouldn't mind taking a bit more clean sheets from a defender, right? I don't think it's the biggest difference in the world. Of sizable and certainly worth mentioning, but it's one of the reasons I'm more willing to have him, because I'll still have some attacking threat, but a much higher defensive benchmark, I would say, to getting clean sheets. So that could be one move. It would also allow me to keep the Konsa Robinson rotation, which works quite nicely. Play Konsa for a few more weeks and then bring Robinson back in after that Villa fixture. Okay, roll in 8, and then that would allow me in 9 to offload one of Salah or Saka, when they both play each other, into Mbeumo, and then probably use the funds elsewhere to maybe upgrade someone to like a Cole Palmer. Okay, so that's one strategy. And then in 10, I'd probably roll as well, or look to get Spurs assets. That's another thing, right? I could pretty much get, because I'll have 2 free transfers in 9, I can get Cole Palmer, I can get Mbeumo for Mbeumo's brilliant fixture run, which has started a while ago, that I would have liked to have had, and then Cole Palmer if he is in red hot form, so it provides me with the opportunity. And in 10, I either roll or I look to go really aggressive with Spurs assets, the likes of Son and Solanke. Okay, so that's one option. However, the other option is not Gvardiol to Robinson. It is Robinson to Gvardiol, and I am extremely tight for time, and I've just noticed that. So you can imagine it's the other way around. But yeah, it's to go Robinson to Gvardiol. And funny story, I didn't even know I had the cash to fund this. For those of you who have been watching the channel, will know that I've been very high on Gvardiol all the way since Game Week 5 in that fixture against Arsenal, and I was looking to get him in Game Week 8. However, I just didn't realize that I had the funds to go from Robinson to Gvardiol, mainly because I had no interest in selling Robinson. I was actually on a walk, right? And towards the end of it, I just started thinking about FPL, and my first thought on that walk was, I'm probably never selling Robinson. It's been so good to me. Fast forward to that evening, I accidentally click on the Hub's AI transfers, and that is not. And it shows me this is your recommended transfer. And I'm like, oh, I didn't know I could do this. That's the one I'm leaning to as of now with this strategy. It would just let me play Gvardiol and Gabriel every week, have huge upside given their attacking prospects, and then just rotate, or not even rotate, really play Konsa this week, and then I would bring in Mykolenko in Game Week 8 for Lewis Hall, because I would have the exact funds because they're the same price, and then I could just play Mykolenko pretty much every week if I choose for the foreseeable future, or I could play Konsa whenever, right? And it's really, really nice. It also means that when Gvardiol goes away to Bournemouth, and I think Rico Lewis might play that game, and therefore he'll be a bit more defensive, I can play Mykolenko ahead of him and hold the Semenyo upside, and there'll be a nice differential where a lot of people will have Semenyo, will have Gvardiol and Lewis. So that's my thinking. In 9, you roll, and in 9 you roll probably, or you're like, okay, one of Saka or Salah can go. I can back one of them. I can always go Palmer. I can always get Mbeumo. So a similar thing to the other strategy, except you'll only have 1 free transfer, and then maybe you can look to go Spurs in 10 or get on a week early. So 9 and 10 is really to shift the premiums. However, as you can see from the graphic, I have chosen to go for the Gvardiol route. For me, even though the Poro route honestly makes a lot of sense, and it's probably better in terms of my team strategy, in terms of my team structure, the models recommended it, another model recommended it ahead of the Gvardiol transfer. I just don't think I can forego the Gvardiol upside, especially when I've been so high on it. He's the one asset I wanted. I won't feel bad about not owning Poro, but I will feel a bit bad about not owning Gvardiol. My gut also tells me to go Gvardiol, so that is the selection. Playing pretty much every week or until Game Week 12, which is, I guess, when I'm looking to wildcard. I'm slightly low on that strategy now. We can talk about that down the line. But yeah, I mean, what an asset to have, right? I've done so much analysis on him already, and you can look at that in the preview, but delighted to own him. Konsa, I mean, they just kept a clean sheet against Bayern, right? They can't do it in the Premier League at the moment. But if there was ever a team to break a streak like that, it would be Man United, right? Saying that, it is also the type of game Man United randomly win. I expect Villa to, from a pure footballing standpoint, no narratives, no goals. I think Villa should dominate them, and I think it could be a really dark day for Eric Ten Hag. They didn't look like they had too much attacking threat against the Spurs side, which certainly offer you transitions, what Man United are literally meant to be good at with their squad makeup and Rashford and Bruno, etc., and Garnacho. And Xerxes to an extent in the middle with how associative he is. So with that in mind, if they can't do it against Spurs, I don't think Villa will have too many problems. They'll still concede chances. Not in love with their backline. But yeah, I'm happy to play Konsa. And also, like I said, box threat. Gabriel, I mean, Southampton at home. I'm not really going to waste your time. Get it, right? So overall this week, very solid defense, I would say. Very, very solid defense. I like Sels because of the upside. Right, moving on to the midfield. As you can imagine, that is where the transfer is being used. It's being used to go from Robinson to Gvardiol. As much as I wouldn't have liked to sell him, I think Gvardiol's upside is too high there. The midfield will remain the same. I expect Rodgers to get good expected minutes against United. I think following Emery's comments, Duran doesn't start. Therefore, he doesn't play a deeper role, Rodgers. So very happy with that. He's starting to score now. Obviously, got his first at Ipswich, got 2 assists against Paul. So he's been absolute gold dust in the last few weeks. Semenyo, I mean, good return. I spoke about how I think high floor, low ceiling. So I'm expecting something similar at Leicester. I wouldn't be surprised if we walk away with like a 5-pointer or something. And then Bukayo Saka and Mo Salah. We're not going to talk about them in terms of their prospects this week because we'll do that in a second. In terms of going down the line, they're obviously big subjects because they hold so much value in my team and they provide me a lot of points, but they also mean that I miss out on the likes of Palmer and Son, who seems to be an increasingly popular option in a few weeks. Now, the argument with Saka always is the ceiling, and he only has 1 goal this year. I think he could have had more, but he's not exactly been the most threatening. You're not going to sell him before Southampton at home, right? But I really will take more of a reassessment after this week as to a potential route to one of the other premiums. I wasn't so open-minded about it until maybe a few days ago, but what I realized is I can't just be foregoing this goal threat. And I think in those bigger games as well, it's weird because Arsenal are so good in big games, but he himself, I wouldn't be surprised if plays wide right, but then he's also someone who turns up in the big games. So there's so many variables to analyze, and we will. But just to know that I am more open to selling him now as a route to other players. Salah, see, I'm a little bit on the opposite side here. I'm just becoming more and more likely to keep him. Okay, the Arsenal fixture in Game Week 9 is the worst fixture on the calendar. But if Calafiori is to play there, I've watched him twice get done down that side. Just positional awareness to an extent because of his speed. I don't think he's quite as quick as some of the other wingers, and his dueling capacity is a little bit different to Timber's, right? Mainly because of his body. I actually think Timber being a bit shorter, therefore having a better sense of gravity, he's just got a better turning radius as well. I actually think that helps him so much. Whereas I think Calafiori can get done. And if anyone's going to do you on that side, it's going to be the best right winger in the world, right? So that fixture could actually be okay. And then you can look at the Arsenal-Liverpool tactics matchups as well, which we can go into down the line. But after that, the fixtures are good. They're ones which he is trying to exploit. I like the Palace fixture. I really like the Chelsea fixture at home. So I'm really not too keen on selling him. I will reassess this because obviously he's 2 million more expensive than pretty much all of the rest. So I will reassess, but as of now, I'm not too keen on selling him. Front 3 is the same because obviously, I mean, Haaland against Fulham, we'll talk about him because I'm probably not going to sell him, right? I had a thought about actually going a Haaland-less strategy kind of soon because I've got a wildcard so I can do it, but I probably won't. If I do, though, or I seriously start to consider it, we can discuss it. We'll discuss his prospects in the next section. Calvert-Lewin, I think I'm just going to let him run. Even if he keeps blanking, I just have too many other opportunities within this team where I can't transfer out a guy who's on penalties, 90 minutes, plays for a team that's getting better, the injured players are returning, and the fixture runs so good, and he's so cheap. I don't think I can sell him, so he can just ride out and just do whatever he wants. Havertz, love owning him as still a huge differential this week, right? Considering a lot of people gone double Arsenal defense, considering a lot of people only have Gabriel and Saka, I am really looking forward to owning him as a differential. He obviously scored against PSG midweek. He is a big game slayer. I just hope that he can have a good finishing day. Because if he does, when he does, that's the day that we're going to get a big haul. And I'm not talking about 13 points. I'm talking 16 plus. That's really what I see him doing when he gets in that finishing hot streak. So look, Southampton is maybe the perfect fixture to start. He should accumulate quite a high volume of opportunities, and I'm hoping for the best. Now, with Havertz, I've seen some people discuss captaincy. He is not part of my conundrum within captaincy. However, I don't mind it. I only would say that you must have a high risk tolerance. I think if he was finishing like I'd seen him do in the past or at just a better level, yeah, I'd be all over it. I just think his floor is a little bit too low with his finishing currently. However, his ceiling is very, very high because just of the type of player he is. So, like I said, if you're willing to tolerate that level of risk, then by all means go ahead. But just know that you thought you were getting the captaincy reveal straight away. No. We'll play a little game first, and then I'll give it to you. So now we'll talk about the individual prospects of all 3 players within this week. And first, just like last week, strategy a little bit again, and I'll touch on it briefly because I did last week. Huge opportunities to exploit when you have downside protection. Given you own the main 3, and I don't think Palmer's in the top 3 for captaincy options this week, I'd have him 4th. maybe even 5th or 6th. Yeah, I could have him as 6th, and I could justify that. There is not too much that can go wrong for me here. Realistically, right, given that I own all of them, and given the only one that will be highly captained is Haaland, if am to cap him at 13, which I think is fair, right? I think Foden behind him, no Rodri, no De Bruyne, 2 physical centre backs, a good shot stopping keeper. I think that's fair. Like he's performed his XG at exactly the level, right? I think it's like 59 and 59 or something like that. So he's not like the world's best finisher, and I think having a good shot stopping keeper is actually quite a big deal then when looking at the analysis. Okay, so realistically, if I cap him at 13 and Saka gets 1 assist, which is very fair of me to assume, and Arsenal keep a clean sheet, given how he is in the bonus structure, he'll get 7. And my downside is 6. That's literally how I see it, and I've gone through this in my head, and I don't think there's any better way of framing it. So, am I willing to take 6 points for some upside? Yes. Now let's speak about Haaland. Look, all the obvious things are there, right? I do, however, think with Foden behind him, he isn't so much of a creative as he was profiled when he was younger. He's more of a high volume shooter. He's a goal scorer now, right? He's also a bit of a ball hog. Not in a bad way. He just is. And then, sure, you'll have Doku and Savio, I imagine, patrolling the wings, or at least one of them with Grealish on the other. So you'll have mechanisms to break down lower blocks, but you won't have the ball striking from range apart from Foden, and he's going to take those shots, right? So that's not really good for Haaland. And then no De Bruyne and no Rodri. Circulation speed is decreased, and I think that's worse for Haaland to being able to find some space because the 8s need to find some space in the pockets, and I think they'll find that harder to do. The only thing that really worries me is that there's no Palhinha, so I wonder how the pivot performs against such a good set of 8s. I don't think Rico Luz is going to play 8 game, by the way. Maybe, actually. Yeah, but for those reasons and the strategy I just spoke about, and given that I have downside protection and I think I can exploit it, I'm not going Haaland. So he's the third option, and he won't even be getting the vice captaincy, which only leaves us with these two. Now, I will say that I obviously am aware of what the guy can do, Erling. I'm just fine, and I think there's enough for me to justify going without. I expect him to be mass captained. I don't expect pretty much anyone to really go for either of the other two. A lot of people don't even own Salah, right? But I'm happy to take the spot. This is a lot closer than I guess most people would anticipate. I really fancy a Salah captaincy this week. The only thing is they play at 12:30. They just played Wednesday night, which is awful. Especially when there's an international. Why don't you just give them the sun? I think Palace have been poor defensively, and I think they have so many problems with their pivot that Salah shouldn't really have too many problems coming inside. He doesn't really need to occupy that wide space because centrally they should have numeric superiority anyway, right? So it's not like they're going to need to shift Palace immensely. Sure, if Palace go really deep, you could argue, okay, you need to hold your width to break down a low block. But I think with the wing backs, they'll be pretty wide anyway. And you'll actually want Salah coming inside because when you play against the back 5, having width is good, but having too much width can actually be a bad thing. The back 5 is quite central, and you can transition on them as such. That is quite a deep discussion and quite a theoretical discussion. There is a tweet on Twitter which addresses it, which if any of you are interested in, comment, and then that will give you more reasoning. But that will take ages, so we don't need to go into that as of now. You can just take my word for it to an extent. So yeah, there are a lot of things I like about it, apart from the fact that Palace have just been poor defensively. I think he looks sharp at the moment to an extent. I think in terms of final third actions, he could be better. But when I say sharp, I mean more so the positioning and the movement. I really like what I'm seeing. He should have had way more against Bournemouth, even more so against Wolves if his actions were sharper. But with a player of this quality, they will come, and there's also a high enough volume. On the flip side, Saka hasn't had too much goal threat this year. And my thinking is, if Southampton can play out the back, the way you can press is you don't need to have your right winger so wide because they'll have to jump to press whoever is building in that left back role, I guess, because you'll have your striker and your 8 in Trossard covering the centre backs. So I don't think he'll be always positioned too far away from goal. And I think they'll, on the turnovers high up the pitch, he can definitely profit there. I think in terms of open play as well, Arsenal will create so many chances. And like I said with Haaland, if I cap him at a brace, I think Saka can score, right? He's got such good ball striking from range. He'll definitely be able to get on the ball quite a bit because Southampton will also try and dominate it. I don't think they'll just be able to, especially with Arsenal's press and defensive now being so good. I think they'll have to submit a little bit. I think without Odegaard, he has such dominion of that right space, especially because Havertz is going to play up top and Trossard operate in a lot of those left 8 zones, even though you'd normally imagine Rice would be there. So I think Rice may be deeper on that right side at times to allow Saka to come inside. Maybe you'll even see more overlapping from the fullback and just a general more attacking patterns of play. So for all those reasons, mainly being the quality of the fixture and the fact that Salah's playing at 12:30, I am indeed going to go with Bukayo Saka. Now, the last thing I would say is I think in terms of the reasoning, it's not as clear cut as last week. I was confident last week, very confident. And I'd say I'm confident this week, but I understand the gap is so much smaller. I understand that even in terms of the analysis, whilst I'm trying to give myself an edge to justify it, it's still pretty close, right? Like I could say a lot of good things about Haaland and as to why they would combat Saka, and I could say a lot of negatives about Saka, but I think they're slightly offset this week in terms of the fixture, and that's what I'm leaning on. Really, I really am playing the fixture here. I also have heard people say that they think he'll get an early sub because of the fact that you expect Arsenal to be cruising. My caveat with this week is that it's international break after, so there's less of a reason because the schedule is slightly less strenuous to bring him off early. Just especially if he's scoring when loads of his other contenders, I'd say for the throne, have been piling goals in, and he's only on one. Let him have some fun and let him get a few, especially with Odegaard out of the side, right? Let him really take control. So for me, I'm going Saka. I've got triple Arsenal. I've got the Havertz upside, and now I have the Saka upside. No one really owns Salah out of the engaged managers anymore, especially those who wildcarded. So that's all good there. And then the only real downside is Harden. But like I said, I'm protected because I own him. So that is all for today. I hope you enjoyed it. Have a wonderful day, and I shall see you tomorrow to solve the rest of your problems. Goodbye.